Joining us now, Washington correspondent for Spectrum News, Kevin Frey. Kevin, the margins are so incredibly tight in the House. That's why these stories matter so much. That plus the fact that the Texas redistricting effort is really only happening because the folks at the White House and in Washington said this would really be good for you to do. So what's the response then from lawmakers, including in the Texas delegation, who were not too fond of this effort either?
Right. I mean, and look, if you consider the fact that the margins in the House are essentially down to if you have like 4 or 5 votes, depending on who is absent and how many people how many slots are empty. And so at the end of the day, this could be the whole ball game, is just this redistricting back and forth. And we seem to be entering and setting up this scenario where we could have really a spiral where various states are now going to basically take and jump at this opportunity, because Republicans are also being leaned on in places like Indiana and Missouri to also take advantage of this opportunity to try to redistrict. And quite frankly, we're seeing this potential of turning into a once in a decade, into every single cycle to try to squeeze out the latest advantage. And so you have seen when it comes to, for example, Congressman Hakeem Jeffries leaning in, saying, please, California, I respect this as an enlightened and forceful effort that they're considering out there, which could, if they go forward with this, and it seems like guns are blazing to try to do this in California as well, that would basically balance out things. But if you look at the grand map, it seems the GOP has more opportunities to try to move things in their direction in the grand scheme of things, and that could help them in what's expected to be a rather tight midterm.
And I think there's 2 pieces to this, too, right? California is saying that it is a tit for tat for what happened in Texas, but California is also going to be putting it to voters. And I had one California official on with me yesterday saying, well, I think that it's going to work, but if not, we'll know where the voters stand. And that's what's making us different in all of this, that we are asking the voters to decide. And then, of course, the other piece that Texas Republicans keep turning to is everyone gerrymanders. OK, the difference is how bold-faced the politics is on this right now.
Right, it's not subtle at all.
Yeah, I mean, it's not every 10 years. It's happening midstream.
Correct. And when it comes to essentially what could go on in California, there has already been some language that has been released where it seems that people are much more amenable to voting for this if it is seen as a direct response to Texas to try to balance out things, basically breaking democracy for the sake of saving democracy, as opposed to eliminating this independent redistricting commission. I mean, it's the old cliche that Democrats keep going back to, but they essentially say that they're fighting with one of their hands behind their back with these independent redistricting commissions.
Yeah, because they are fighting to maintain norms that Republicans are keen to break, in this case on congressional maps. You know, one of the reasons why the Republican Party might want some pad in terms of their efforts to keep the House is A, because the margins are thin, and B, because of the big, beautiful bill that they passed earlier this year, where we've seen Republicans from Wyoming to New York really struggle in defense of that bill. And I actually think our home state of New York does provide an interesting micro look at what this defense looks like, because you've got everyone from Elise Stefanik to Mike Lawler having a tough time with it. I mean, talk about their differing responses.
Right. So let's start with Mike Lawler. He's in really, after he decided not to run for governor in the last couple of weeks, he is now in really one of the most competitive and closely watched congressional races across the country. This is right north of the 5 boroughs of New York City. And he has, just within the last couple days, started rolling out these various ads trying to redefine the one big beautiful bill, arguing that he's protecting Medicaid, for example, by instituting work requirements, and also touting something that's very, very niche to New York, which is the state and local tax deduction, among other things, trying to redefine an issue. But at the same time, the one big beautiful bill, as we've seen in polling, at least at this stage, and we've still got a year for the definitions to be really set in stone, is underwater. And so that is a difficulty for these Republicans to navigate. Stefanik was facing booing at an event in her own district. And some of this speaks to kind of her own evolution and also the dynamics of that part of the district. Plattsburgh is perhaps arguably one of the bluer segments of a red district, where she was facing lots of pushback from the public during this public event that she was speaking at. I don't know that I see that as necessarily a response directly to the one big beautiful bill. I see it more largely as people are tired of her in this district, particularly some of the more liberal folks who quite frankly see her as not standing by the principles she once stood for.
Yeah, and being a steadfast ally of the president,
Correct.
which if and when she runs for governor, that is likely going to be her calling card
1,000%.
in that really important race that we'll watch. But there's another New York race that I do want to make mention of, which is that Mayor Andrew Cuomo still continuing former Governor Andrew Cuomo wanting to be Mayor Andrew Cuomo, continuing that bid and talking about the ways that he thinks that Trump could help that election.
This was in Politico, and I think to set the scene, it's important to remember that Zohran Mamdani won the Democratic nomination. And the way this field is now set up going into the general, it's almost a rerun of the primary, add in a Republican challenger. And so when you have a Republican challenger plus the current mayor, Eric Adams, who's running as independent, plus Andrew Cuomo, who's continuing his race, that's fractioning off basically the more moderate to conservative voter bloc in New York, whereas Mamdani is obviously pulling the more progressives. And so Cuomo, in this Politico audio that was obtained, basically suggested that Trump could perhaps, and his team has spun this as hypotheticals that he was talking in, perhaps try to convince voters that he is the best alternative to take on Mamdani. And quite frankly, polling suggests that in most head-to-heads, he would be the most direct challenge to Mamdani winning this in terms of saving New York City. But he would still be losing if it's a direct head-on-head.
Yeah, because you're splintering the field in that way between the Republican and the two independents, though we do know that Trump very much has this race on mind, which, of course, he does as someone who lived in Manhattan all those years. But then also the fact that it makes sense that he would go after Mamdani. So it's some political analysis, but it is strange hearing it come from Cuomo.
And keep in mind, Mamdani is jumping on this, as he rightly should, because obviously Trump did not do well in New York City in the past 3 presidential elections. And so being able to tie him to Trump, even in just this hypothetical space, could be an albatross around his neck.
Yeah, it's a sticky point for Democrats. But, Kevin, there's one more story I want to get your take on, and it's California Governor Gavin Newsom, who's revealing what's behind his recent shift in tactics toward President Trump on social media. You might be noticing a few more all caps than usual because the Democratic governor spoke out late last week about the moment he decided to start posting something like this. You see it on the screen, mimicking the president's distinctive all caps insult-laden style.
I think it connects here in L.A. and the fires. And how he was completely misrepresenting the facts, misinformation, disinformation. Elon Musk was piling on as well. So, yes, I've changed. The facts have changed. We need to change. And we need to stand up to this authoritarian. We need to stand up at this moment. It is foundational. Again, it is not about Republican versus Democrat. This guy is an invasive species. He's completely different. I respect the Republican Party. I'm married in a Republican family. I have deep love and respect for people I disagree with. He is something altogether different, and he is unmoored. There is no constraints. So, yes, we're going to punch back.
Meanwhile, Vice President J.D. Vance criticized Newsom's approach in an interview last night, giving this message to the California governor.
Some free political advice from the President of the United States is stop sounding like crazy people. That really is all it is. I mean, this idea that Gavin Newsom is somehow going to mimic Donald Trump's style, I think that ignores the fundamental genius of President Trump's political success, which is that he's authentic. He just is who he is. You've got to be yourself. You've actually got to talk to people honestly about the issues. I don't think it's that complicated. Don't be a crazy person. Be authentic.
Okay, so I actually do think that Vance does give one little piece that is salient advice for all politicians, which is the authenticity piece. But what I see in what Newsom is doing, not just in the redistricting fight, but specifically on social media, is trying to make the president seem unserious, like a joke. Because you look at that social media feed sometimes, and you do have to check yourself, like, this is the president of the United States. But that's how it's been for almost 10 years now.
Yeah, so the question, and when it comes to the authenticity piece, we were just talking about Zohran Mamdani and checking all those boxes there in New York City. When it comes to the dialogue, to what you just said, this has been a decade of this. So I don't know that this is going to change anyone's mind, but it's certainly getting him a lot of traction when it comes to the national dialogue. And it's giving, at least for Democrats, the impression that someone is hitting back and someone is making fun. The other thing I found rather interesting in some of what the governor said there, and I think is revealing and I've heard this from other Democrats as well, particularly when it comes to the redistricting fight, is essentially Trump has so much changed the paradigm, particularly in round two, that we no longer can just kind of be the party of we're going to stick by the norms and play by the rules because the rules are being broken. And if you don't counteract, then it could be lost altogether.
Yeah, and I think that's clearly what you're seeing from people like Newsom, from Hochul in New York. Democrats are saying they don't want to play by the old rules because even though that's the ideal, they want to play by the rules, the other side isn't. And so how do you win when the other side isn't even playing the same game?
And the philosophical question then becomes, at what point do you keep going down the rabbit hole until you can't recover?
And I have heard Democrats, as I'm sure you have too, say, yeah, I see why we need to do this now, but it doesn't mean I'm not concerned at the same time. Kevin Frey, always good to have you. Thank you for coming on.
No problem.